We are very fortunate right now to have Austan Goolsbee on, a brilliant University of Chicago graduate school business professor and also an economic advisor to Barack Obama. I know we've been covering the 2008 campaign, but what a better way to get where Barack Obama stands on the economy than talking to Austan Goolsbee. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, my pleasure, Alex.
So one fundamental question I'd like to ask you is, you and Barack Obama, how easy is economic and social mobility do you perceive in this country? If it's high, then should we not address it? And if it is an issue, people are really having a tough time moving up the economic ladder, even if they try hard. What's government's role in making that easier?
Okay, that's really quite central to your view of what's been happening the last 8 years. I would characterize, previous to the last 10 or 15 years, the degree of social mobility to be extremely high in the U.S., higher than pretty much any country in the world. Sometime in the last 10 years, for reasons that economists are hotly debating, if you take the income distribution, 85–90% of it becomes virtually stagnant. Now, at the very top, there have been humongous income gains,
with even these hedge fund guys only getting taxed at 15%, right?
Yeah. So hedge funds are, maybe they're at the pinnacle of the pyramid, but there's a very small segment that's had huge income gains, and the mobility into that segment, it's not like, well, if you just wait long enough, you'll get to be one of these hedge funds, or one of these hedge funds. 20 years from now, that guy's going to be working at a middle-class job. I mean, there has been a segmentation that a lot of people don't begrudge the top of the distribution getting richer, but if you've got 85–90% of the distribution stagnant, I think that's really disturbing, because what we've seen, what's going to happen if that occurs, and we've seen it, and that is people are going to start. There's going to be a big backlash against all markets, against trade, against globalization. They're going to start losing health care. I mean, with income stagnant, the cost of a bunch of important things like college, health, energy, they go up, and now it makes people angry, and so they got to deal with that.
One thing that bothers me at the University of Chicago that I can see from when I've talked to these kids who want to go into investment banking is that these top ones, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they have pretty big human resource departments, but they're only recruiting at UChicago, Duke, and the Ivies. Even the kid with a 3.8, 3.9 at Ohio State, I hear is really having a tough time getting into those doors. I mean, from what you see, is that true? Like, people, if they don't go to these top colleges, are having a tough time getting into the hedge fund world?
I don't know the answer, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is true, because, like I say, in the data, there has been, in recent years, this severing of the mobility. Person from the middle could easily get into the very top, so I wouldn't be surprised by that. And the second thing I would say is that across the economy, you've seen the economy has been putting a huge premium on getting education, getting more education, and getting higher and higher quality education. So I really wouldn't be surprised if that is the case.
And do you get that education by increasing revenue, by increasing taxes? Is that the best way?
That's part. Look, the government's got to help people to get through their education. One fact that's very disturbing and also compelling about the U.S. education system is that until recently, we had the largest share of 24-year-olds with a college degree in the world, by a lot. We were always first. And that was kind of the engine driving a big segment of our productivity, right? In recent years, that's no longer true. We've fallen to somewhere in the 30s. We're just below Bulgaria and just above Costa Rica. And a guy I know from Costa Rica got upset. He said, "What are you saying about Costa Rica?" I'm not saying anything about Costa Rica other than if we have the same education as Bulgaria and Costa Rica, then 25 years from now we're going to have the same incomes as Bulgaria and Costa Rica. And I don't think America's ready for that.
Is it a problem with inadequate funding, though?
Yeah, so what I was going to say is we've seen that happen, and there are two reasons for that. One is that we still have by far the largest share of people starting college, but we also have by far the biggest dropout rate. So we have very hard time getting people through college now. Because if you look at the people who have a job that they are working at while they're in college, the dropout rate is far, far higher among that group than those who don't have a job.
They don't see it worth it to take out the loan. I mean, Jesse Jackson, when you go over to his compound, says even these poor minority students who are taking out loans, in the end, that it feels like they have exorbitant rates to pay off, and it's the vicious cycle of poverty.
Usually it's the same people.
Yeah.
They're having to work a job outside of their schoolwork, and they're taking loans. I mean, as you know, that's the standard thing, and that has been very disturbing. So that's why I say government getting involved in helping people in that area is important. The second is, it's clear that a fairly large segment of people don't have the skills coming out of high school that they need to complete college. So
right.
You really got to focus on both. I mean, you got to get the K through 12 right, and you got to get the funding right.
Moving on to globalization, you just mentioned it earlier. A lot of people, moderates and a little right of center in this election, are worried that candidates like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, I know we talked about this off air, are pandering to the far left part of the party. We know that Barack Obama, for example, voted against CAFTA, but voted for free trade with Oman. As a voter, like, where should we think he'll be on free trade? Is he going to pander to the far left and think that globalization is not beneficial to our economy, or, like you said, does he have a more nuanced and sophisticated position?
Okay, as I agree, he has a more nuanced, sophisticated position. I don't think that he has, if you look at his record, if you read his book, the second book, I think you'll get a good sense of where he is. I don't think he's pandered or changed his position one bit over the course of this thing. What he has said, and I agree with what he said, he recognizes that free trade has been good for the economy, that it's helped keep prices low in this country, that it has formed the basis of many industries in the U.S. and can have a great impact on our economic growth. And at the same time, if we are not mindful of the fact that there are people who are getting left out of that,
and we need to retrain them for 20%.
With retraining, and if we are not mindful of the fact that in a lot of these free trade agreements, the agreement may be 1,000 pages long. 10 of the pages are about reducing tariffs and promoting free trade, and the other 990 pages are loopholes, write-off giveaways for corporations and various investors. If we are not mindful of the animosity that is generating, the entire case that we make for globalization is going to fall apart. Nobody is going to support free trade in circumstances like that.
But you
shouldn't call that free trade. I mean, that's not free trade.
But when you talk about Barack Obama, he talks about combating global poverty. So does John Edwards. But you can't combat global poverty by just giving these poor countries handout. What's the best way? Make them more productive, have them trade. If you want to combat global poverty, you got to trade.
He doesn't disagree with that. I mean, in his book, he talks about
the benefits.
As I say, the case of when Barack Obama is out on the stump, when he's on, NBC on a Sunday show, when he's talking to people here in Chicago, he's, in my experience, giving the same consistent message on this, which is he's not disputing that there are benefits from free trade. It's not playing into some kind of a pander. He's saying, look, basic labor and environmental standards, which are now the core part of it.
But he's not for like a global
agreement.
minimum wage. That just doesn't make sense. He's not for that, is he?
I mean, an equalized wage in every country, I haven't seen him advocate
Because the
that.
far left sometimes talk about that, but...
I mean, I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen any specific thing like that. He's for putting the labor standards into
but not
the core
specific
of
wage standards.
Well, the ILO has a series of core standards. On the issue of the minimum wage, as you know, there are a lot of subtleties that come up, like if there's going to be a minimum wage, should it be normed by the median wage in a country, stuff like that.
But
like, very
just one last point I was pulling with the issue of Wal-Mart. Like, I read Why Globalization Works, and